Buck Sexton is a radio host. He hosts Clay and Buck. And he says this. He's lived in New York for the last, 20, 30 years. Every night outside my New York City apartment, it sounds like Mad Max on the streets as biker gangs, ATV mobs, and drag racers with cars sounding like F-18 fighter jets tear through Times Square in packs. It's a loud reminder of New York City's rampant lawlessness and the mayor's incompetence. I see this. I identify with it. I'm a New Yorker. I love the city. But there's a lot of problems going on in New York City right now.
Yeah, can we keep that tweet up for a second? Is he saying that he lives in Times Square?
No, I don't know where he lives actually, but he lives close enough to be able to hear it.
It sounds like Mad Max in the street.
Yeah, he lives close to the Times Square area.
Times Square.
Yeah, so he could be.
What the fuck are you doing living near Times Square?
No, a lot of people. You can hear Times Square. I used to live on 54th and 8th. You can hear all the trouble going on in Times Square.
Okay, because Times Square is what, 40th and.
Yeah, but you can hear all that stuff.
Okay.
When shit goes down in Times Square, believe me.
Because Times Square is an absolute chaos zone.
It's a shithole.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
go live on the Upper East Side or go live in Battery Park.
Let me tell you something, it's all bad. I got friends on the Upper East Side right now that are living in, they're really, really worried about the crime is real bad. And we talk a lot about this show about crime, about what's going on with the DAs there, where you have, criminals that, somebody commits a crime and they roam free the next day, no bail. And then you've got people now in New York City. I don't know if you saw that story about the guy who owns the bodega, who committed, he was acting in self-defense and ultimately wound up in Rikers Island on a $250,000 bail because he stabbed someone who was stabbing him. Ridiculous what's going on in New York. So I'm curious though, because you were in New York City.
Yeah.
You're from Florida.
From Miami, yeah.
So when you go to a place now, what was your experience there as someone traveling? Now, granted, you don't live there every day. You're experiencing a taste of it. How did you feel being in New York? And how did it feel different, New York versus Miami? The vibe, the energy, how populated was it? What were you thinking and feeling when you went over there?
Well, number one, I go to New York every summer.
Okay.
I haven't been back since COVID, so I'll say that I haven't been since 2020, 21, now 2022. So I haven't been in technically 3 summers, whatever. But I've gone every year since 2010 when, Kim and Chris were doing their whole thing to circle back.
Back to Kim.
That's where I've been going. So I love New York. I've heard a lot, obviously, since I can't tell you how many friends have moved out of New York down to South Florida during the pandemic. But I ran all over the streets of New York. Shout out to Neil because he was following me because I was filming all throughout New York.
Of you guys. I saw a picture of you guys.
I filmed 2 segments when I was there.
Okay.
I was going for fun, and then Neil was like, all right, I'll come with you. I'm like, hold the camera, follow me around, mic me up, we're running the streets. And I filmed 2 segments. The first segment was how to ball on a budget, like what you could do in New York. I'm like, I pulled $1,000 out of an ATM. This is all the money I have for the whole weekend. Let's see what kind of trouble we can get into.
Great idea.
And I went, and it was like Central Park, free, Statue of Liberty, ferry, $22, like museum, $17, bike ride, $12. Like, I didn't spend $1,000. I had the best time in New York. I was running all over the streets. I didn't get stabbed. I didn't get raped. I didn't get molested. Great time. Kind of wish I got raped, but that's another story.
Oh, dear.
If there was a, hot chick or whatever, or maybe a trans.
Did you learn nothing from the conversation we just had?
Nothing. In one ear, out the other.
Zero. Like, it's just unbelievable.
This is the problem with Bad Boys with Edge. But then number 2, I did a lot of interviews and I asked people 3 questions. How expensive is it to live here in New York? How much is your rent and what do you get for it? I think like $32 billion of taxpayer revenue has left New York since the pandemic.
Yep.
Do you think those people are coming back? And I got a wide array of answers. And just what do you love about New York City? So I really asked locals only. So the first segment was like touristy stuff. What you can do is geared towards tourists. And then I interviewed dozens of locals. I got to tell you, like the locals of New York, unless you're a billionaire, millionaire, saving money on taxes, New Yorkers are the best, man. They love New York. They're from New York. They represent New York. They're basically saying, go. You want to come back? We'll take you back. But don't forget what New York is. Like the vibe of New York, like diversity, culture, electric, amazing. I love New York City. Granted, it is a little bit dirty. And granted, it is crazy expensive.
Dirty. It's very dirty.
So if you don't like garbage on the streets or paying high rent, New York's probably not for you.
Yeah.
But if you like being able to go to any comedy show or Broadway show or amazing food or amazing people or cultures or being able to walk wherever you want and do everything, New York's great.
How did you feel about the energy? Because Florida right now is hot, right? It's hot. In many ways, it's hot because it's
very hot here.
But it's also hot because a lot of people came here, and it's feeling like the energy is very on here. How did you feel about the energy in New York there? Did you feel like any of what we talk about, I've been back to since I moved here, so we may have different opinions about it, but did you feel like any of the energy of like it feeling a little depleted, or a lot of people had left, or a little bit of the soul was missing?
Well, in the summers, it's fair to say, especially on the weekends, a lot of the uppity type people will go to the Hamptons. Right. So that's been every year they go to the Hamptons. How about this? Let me answer the question directly. If you would have told me that, hey, by the way, this whole city during COVID lockdown, like was like a ghost town, Gotham City type vibes, I would be like, yeah, I'm not sensing any of that. I didn't get any of those vibes.
Okay.
Like, you'll see the content that I put out. I was up and down the streets, walking around, having a good time. There's people in Central Park. People are going to plays. Dinners are packed. I went to Little Italy for dinner. Great time. Like, it didn't feel as like crazy, desolate, blue, Democrat, horrible, homeless takeover that you've heard about. Let me give you one more story. I've heard the same thing about LA, and I did experience LA because I went with Patrick, shout out to PBD. I went with Pat and Tigran in 2020. And we went to Venice specifically to see all the homelessness, and it was pervasive. It was bad. We went back last month, and it was so much better. And I think we can all agree, if LA was a shit show, Pat from LA via Iran, he would call it out. We've talked about this in the podcast. He's like, we had a great time. Venice was nice.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, New York City, LA, some of these, big blue metropolitan cities definitely suffered during lockdowns and COVID. But hopefully I think they've learned their lesson and that you can't lock people down.
Yeah, they didn't though.
But you're more coming from a vaccine angle, or what angle?
I'm just coming
tax
angle?
angle?
I'm coming from a tax angle. I'm coming from a mandate angle. I'm coming from a soft on crime angle.
I'm right there with you with the tax stuff.
I think these places, what I feel since going back to New York, I've been back very briefly, but what I feel is that that the tourists have come back. I see that happening. I see that energy. I definitely see that some of the restaurants are, back in business, and
they've all built things outside.
Yeah, they had to.
Exactly.
They had to build them outside because you couldn't go inside.
Exactly.
You couldn't go inside.
And some of them are kind of cute, what they do.
Yes, except for the traffic that ensues as a result, because now you got a whole bunch of restaurants in the middle of the street. So there's that's another whole chaotic thing.
Not in the middle of the street, on the side of the street.
It's basically in the middle of the street. Your car can, depending on the car you have, you may or may not fit down the middle. But I think the tourists came back, but everybody I know who left New York is not going back. They're not going back. And there's still a whole bunch of people in New York that are desperate to get out, because I think they're worried. And I think it's different if you're single, if you're young.
Yep.
I think those people aren't concerned about the same things as parents are. Like, I don't know that I would have been so focused on the crime and so focused on the mandates and so focused on the bureaucracy if I didn't have a child. So I think that maybe the population may change, and you may see an influx of people who are in a different stage of life flock into New York, where they're not as worried about finances. A lot of people go to New York and they live 6 people in a little 2-bedroom apartment. They can afford to do that, and they're like, oh, who cares?
Well, when you're single, you have a lot more flexibility.
More flexibility. That's correct. And younger, because you don't have responsibility to another human. In most situations.
If you don't make serious money in New York City, whatever you want to qualify as serious money, let's say $250,000 a year, whatever, and you want to have kids, you can't live in New York City.
Yeah, that's right.
You can't do that. You go to Long Island, you move to South Florida, like you kind of get in and get out of there. But you're from New York?
I'm from New York.
So, okay, and you were born in late 70s?
I was born in 79.
Okay.
I was born in Brooklyn.
So New York in the 70s and early 80s, before Giuliani showed up.
That's what it looks like.
Hellhole.
Yeah, hellhole.
No way is that's not what it is now.
It's pretty close, because let me tell you something. If you're in the center, I don't know where you hung out when you were in New York.
I was literally everywhere.
Literally.
From Battery Park up to like Upper West Side.
If you go by the 10th and 11th Avenues, if you go all the way west and you go all the way east at night. Yep. If you go in Hell's Kitchen and you go out, I went to
Chelsea Piers at night. It was nice.
Chelsea Piers isn't so bad.
Okay.
No, I'm talking about you go in the 50s, you go all the way. What Giuliani did is basically, and you can love him, you can hate him, but the crime areas became less and they were smaller. And now what you have is those areas, they're just bleeding out. So I have friends that live on 11th Avenue and 54th Street that are like, I don't even, it's a mess out here at night. So I don't know. I mean, listen, I'm glad to hear that some of the life is, I love that city. That's my city. I'm glad to hear some of the life is back. But that place is going to have to change when it comes to crime, when it comes to mandates, when it comes to taxes, if they're going to incentivize people like me to go. But I mean, I just have no interest.
Well, when they're losing people like you and losing people with microphones, they're going to talk shit about the city that they're from. That should be a trigger warning saying, guys, we're not doing something right.
They don't care.
But they should.
I know. They should care.
I will say New York is a very magical place, and I only want the best for New York City. I love New York City. However, I'm not moving there. I'm going to stay in Miami.
Yeah, of course not, because you're not crazy. You want to keep your money, Adam.
I do.
Like every other sane person, you want to keep your cat. If you like the short clip, you can catch another one here, or you can catch the full episode right here.